Je vous passe la parole, Milica. I'm giving you the floor. Milica and Florian, the floor is yours. Go.
Thank you, Panos.
Il est 35, je prends acte de 5 minutes de retard.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish you good morning on behalf of our entire team, Grand Genève at Saint-Saul, and our operative title is also Charter for Socio-Ecological Transition of a Cross-Border Metropolitan Region. Next, please. In our presentation, you will see 4 chapters. We will first talk about the challenges for regions and planning regions. We will talk about the process and the protagonists in which we engaged in this project. Then we will talk about the Charta itself, the body of our work, and finally give you some illustrations through the case studies. Next, please. So to begin with the challenges. Next, please. We have started, actually departed from a thesis posited in 2005 by Studio Basel, Contemporary City Institute, which observed Greater Geneva as being asymmetric and polarized and divided, consisting of French Geneva, the other Geneva so-called, and the central Swiss Geneva. This kind of basic condition of uneven development is observed also in other cross-border situations in Switzerland, namely in Basel. Florian.
Next, please.
Next, please.
Yes. So in the Greater Geneva, we are actually witnessing an asymmetric development in terms of demographic characteristics.
Can I say something? Could it be possible to share the screen?
No.
We can see your face, but not what is on the screen, not the documents. We cannot see them, just only in very small. I don't know if it's possible from Geneva or from you to share your screen to see your documents on the screen rather than your face.
I think maybe Hippomene, you would have to share the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Parce que c'est pas nous qui projetons, qui partageons l'écran.
Ce serait Hippomène qui devrait afficher à l'écran la vue d'Hippomène, donc la vue des documents qui sont projetés. Voilà, parfait.
Oui, vous m'entendez? Okay. Normalement, vous pouvez voir vos visuels sur votre écran parce que ici, l'équipe vous les passe dans le Zoom.
Oui, non, mais c'est bien de les voir en Zoom en même temps qu'on a en direct, même si on peut les projeter par ailleurs. Merci en tous les cas.
Voilà, c'est bon là, comme ça?
Parfait. Okay, so in the Greater Geneva, we are witnessing an asymmetric development in terms of demographic characteristics, the housing market, and of course, economic opportunities. In 2015, 78,000 residents of the Genevois Français worked in the canton of Geneva, to which you have to add 20,600 residents from other Swiss cantons who work actually also in Geneva. The situation is becoming more and more unsustainable. People who live outside the borders of the canton of Geneva while working there commute from an increasingly wide radius. Next, please. Next, please. Yes. This asymmetry is exacerbated by the housing production on both sides of the border. While the canton of Geneva is far from meeting the housing demands, relatively many housing units are produced in the Genevois Français. In parallel to the housing crisis, there's also a lack of public infrastructures and services, especially in those areas that are now developed in the region. And demographic forecasts, as you can see on the right, predict a further increase in the population of Greater Geneva, with the French Genevois accounting for most of it. Next, please. If you compare the pattern of urbanization on both parts of the territory, we also observe an important difference. In the Genevois Français, for almost the same population, land consumption is 1.7 times higher than in the canton of Geneva. This is mainly due to a dominance of single-family houses. Next, please. At the same time, also due to the frozen fields of the so-called surface d'assolement, as soon as you leave the urbanity of the core city, there's a kind of a countryside atmosphere in the canton of Geneva. While in the Genevois Français, many private developers realize suburban housing complexes, les promoteurs, which too often lack of quality in terms of architecture, amenities, and common spaces, whether they are indoor or outdoor. Milica? Next, please.
Among the challenges, we have also pointed out the fragmentation of land and ecosystems through land consumption, construction of infrastructures, and so on. Next, please. We spoke at length and at different occasions about inadequate cross-border governance and planning coordination, which is due to let's say, incompatibility of the political bodies on the two sides of the border. They act at different levels. Also, the asymmetry in terms of political and economic resources. Next, please. And we have also spoken about the planning, regional planning itself as a discipline and a practice that is perhaps in its current form not able to tackle such an ambitious challenge as ecological transition. And there we have also situated one of the main goals of our project to sketch out a framework for regional planning that would possibly enable such ambition or almost utopian goal to be realized. So moving from strategic and targeted planning toward an integrated platform that would be able to negotiate between diverse plans and projects. Next, please. And finally, in the recent months, we have also witnessed the vulnerability of the border regions due to the COVID lockdown, which has exacerbated some of the previously mentioned challenges. Next, please. On our process and protagonists. Next, please. We have worked as mentioned, in 3 clusters, several departments and units at the ETH Zurich and Uni Luxembourg were involved. For instance, ETHZ One Forum and the Institute of Geography and Spatial Planning at Uni Luxembourg. In total, well over 120 team members, experts, collaborators, and students took part in the project. Next, please. We ran 4 parallel studios in ETH Zurich and Luxembourg, 2 of them around the notion of the unbuilt or non-built lands, and 2 on the built, envisioned as a kind of a complementary effort. And next, please, we conducted extensive investigative campaigns into the territory on a number of occasions. Next, please, you have here a little movie that you can play, a few seconds, that give you some impressions of these. If you press once again, you can play that movie. Exactly, so you have some impressions of these investigations, which were basically ethnographic and conducted across the region with students, and they served as a basis of drawing our analysis and hypothesis. Next, please. Moving to our Charta for the socio-ecological transition, As mentioned, we would like to put forward the concept proposal for a new regional planning approach that would be able to engage with this bipolar figure of Geneva and transform it toward something more sustainable and more equitable. Next, please.
So one of the most interesting scenarios seems to us that the one of David Holmgren, one of the pioneers of permaculture. And according to Holmgren, we are confronted with two simultaneous developments, climate change and resource depletion. Holmgren intersects the two axes and thus arrives at 4 scenarios. And it's not a secret that we agree with him on the approach of the Earth stewards. We believe that technological process alone will not suffice to bring about the necessary ecological transition, without, of course, denying the benefits of many technological advancements. We are committed to exploring the prospects of a more structural transformation of our society, as has been mentioned this morning, its economic, social, political, and anthropological orientation towards more self-sufficiency. Next, please. And to approach the question of land and soil is for us the key to achieve the ecological transition. Next, please. In this context, we developed what we called a charter for the socio-ecological transition of a cross-border metropolitan region, which is composed of 1, urban strategies, and 2, territories of potentials. Next, please. Let's start with the urban strategies, of which we propose 5, and we call them Cité, as it describes the narrative of a kind of a productive city-land relation. Cité naturelle, cité agricole, cité de proximité, cité partagée, cité cyclique. Next one. This is one of the targets to reduce in Geneva the CO2 emissions per capita from 10 tons to 1 ton. And we think that many of us are not yet aware of what this really means. It means that we have to drastically change our economy, our lifestyles, and our governance. So those are the strategies we propose. First, Cité Naturelle concerns basically natural resources. It is about protecting soils, water, air, and biodiversity. Cité Agricole is about regionalizing the food system based on the principles of agroecology. Cité de Proximité is about decentralizing services and working opportunities, and about recombining working and housing, and thus reducing mobility. Cité Partagée, also very important, is about enhancing social equity through new forms of cooperative governance and property ownership arrangements. And finally, Cité Cyclique, which aims at closing metabolic loops of energy and matter circulation. Next, please, Milica.
I will briefly present some of the expanded notions. I can't spend time on Cité Naturelle, unfortunately, but it is clear that for the Greater Geneva, this is one of the strongest potentials in the process of ecological transition. Geneva is already in a kind of an extraordinary rich ecological setting, and this body of strategies comprises those that ensure biological continuity between higher and lower altitudes, and as mentioned, preservations of soils, water, unbuilt lands, and forests. Next, please. We have to somehow be able to grasp the challenge of reducing carbon emissions. We have also engaged with the various efforts to quantify possible practices. There is a lot of conversations about planting trees. So what would it take, or how many trees would have to be planted to reduce CO2 emissions per capita of Greater Geneva from 10 to 1 ton? Well, the answer is we would need approximately half of a little bit more than a half of territory of Switzerland to achieve that in terms of compensation. Next, please. Cité Agricole. This is an important body of strategies and agendas aiming to regionalize Greater Geneva's food system based on the principles of agroecology. Next, please. in analyzing the conditions in the territory, we have collected some of the valuable experiences and patterns on the one hand. For instance, the structures of the bocage genevoise are important, let's say, cultural landscapes that would need to be enhanced and carried forward into the future. And we have also noted a kind of a deep history and philosophy of, let's say, permaculture and self-sufficiency, which goes back to Voltaire himself. Further, we have also analyzed the actual, the notion of self-sufficiency and came to an understanding that Greater Geneva already has a high degree of food self-sufficiency at 48%, which could be further enhanced. Some of the parameters we engaged with point to let's say, politicized discussion on the change of diet. Indeed, some savings would be achieved through, for instance, fostering diets that are more vegetarian or predominantly vegetarian. Organic, on the other hand, the switch to organic would require some additional land, but it is possible to achieve. And to indicate, sorry, please, I forgot to indicate next, please. Next slide. So here you see the idea of the self-sufficiency. Next, please. Some of the quantities that we worked on. Change of diet, next please. Switch to organic, next please. And we have collected our findings in form of a set of agendas and policies. And in the case of Cité Agricole, we speak about agroecological practices that involve a range of principles, from ecological and biological ones, in particular diversity, which would be achieved, for instance, through the planting practices such as agroforestry, to the social principles of responsible governance and solidarity economy, which are also part of agroecology. And these agendas also involve regional distribution and selling, which have been explored and described in our report. Next, please.
Yes, so Cité de Proximité describes a new planning culture which interweaves urban structures, productive landscapes, and topologies of biodiversity. It aims at interlinking working, living, shopping, and leisure, and places them in a new relationship with social and cultural infrastructures, agriculture, and natural areas. It promotes proximity by a small-grained structure of its development. Next, please. The development of urban areas should be structurally designed in such a way that they are generally user-intensive. This is not a question of build density, but of the layout of the urban structure. The point is to embed the local turn in a small-scale urban structure so that living, working, gardening, production, commerce, administration, and leisure are brought together locally. We would go so far as to refuse to grant planning permission to shopping malls as a matter of principle. It is ecological madness that this car-intensive, space-consuming, and architecturally completely irreversible model is still being reproduced today. Next, please. It sounds so banal. We have to bring together again the different activities, especially living and working, and yet it is so difficult. Even though the planning culture has changed in recent decades from a car-friendly town planning to the city of short distances. We need an urban-rural development in which citizens see less mobility as a gain of their quality of life. Also, the emergence of teleworking has taken longer than many expected. It is now accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, most people need social contact with others at work. Therefore, we plan that new residential complexes Generous spaces for working should be provided in different scales and for different forms of labor. Collective workspaces, creative hubs, joint workshops for craftsmen, and so on. These programs should be systematically inscribed in the new, resolutely hybrid architecture in combination with childcare and other services. Next, please. So as for the quantification, we investigated some scenarios like this one. How much CO2 could be saved if every commuter worked 1 day per week from home or from a co-working space? And our partners from the Luxembourg Institute for Science and Technology calculated that we can then reduce the commuter's footprint from 1.6 tons to 1.28 tons CO2 per capita. Next, please. I will not develop, and if you can press again, then there's also kind of an animation. Can you press, please? Okay, no, it doesn't matter. I will not develop the next two cités, Cité Partagée and Cité Cyclique, although they are of equal importance. Cité Partagée valorizes and rises the attractiveness of common goods, cooperative structures, and non-profit activities, as well as local and regional solidarity networks, and thus strengthens the spirit of the community. As common good, we consider resources, air, soil, water, land, infrastructures, knowledge, and housing. Yes, housing is an infrastructure, as Ungas claimed. Next, please. So in terms of quantification, our partners from LIST calculated that if we decrease the individual housing surface by 6 square meters per capita, we could reduce the energy consumption related to housing by 16.5%. And if we reduce the amount of single family houses from 57, this is the amount today in Geneva, to 30%, we would reduce the energy consumption related to housing by 17%. Next, please. The last one is the Cité Cyclique, which is based on the principles of circular economy and takes into account the cycles of the environment and the biorhythm of human beings and animals. Cité Cyclique promotes a new planning culture, which takes into consideration all the life cycles of a building and which generates flexible buildings that can adapt to the changing needs of the forms of cooperation and living together. Next, please, Milica.
Thank you. So we arrived to the second part of the Charta, Territories of Potentials, which describe geographic principles with which we engage with the territory, which is specific, which is historical. So how do the different agendas or policies arrive at the different parts of the territory? So first point here is that we believe that metropolitan regions are the right scales today at which we have the opportunity to address ecological transition. So cities are small and they are dense. They don't have natural resources, but regions do. And thus there is a chance of increasing self-sufficiency at appropriate scales. Next, please. We have engaged also with the notion of ecological region. You may notice here that we have suggested a correction of boundaries of Greater Geneva. There is a elaboration in our report, thus moving from purely administrative boundaries to those that would also involve the idea of ecological governance over water resources, for example. Next, please. These territories of potentials enable the creating of a balance and the synergy of the built and the unbuilt areas at the regional scale. And thus we have a chance to avoid the competition among the land uses, but we have a chance to actually create a kind of a balance and the synergy and the gradual development and improvement of all the different landscapes that the region is composed of. Next, please. We have identified 7 urban and landscape characters from the binational metropolis onward. I will mention them individually. And the hypotheses for these were created through the research. So these are not the generalized classical land uses. No, these are specific characters that we hypothesized through our research and then gradually elaborated them cartographically and through other indicators. So going to those territories of potentials, I will try to move very, very fast. So the binational metropolis describes a potential for a new polycentric networked urban figure at the regional scale, which concentrates build-up areas around existing cores and infrastructure arteries, protecting agricultural land and nature areas. Next please. We have identified, next please. We have, as I mentioned, worked with cartographic indicators to be able to corroborate the idea of such a network structure. Next, please. Here we show, let's say, the development over time from the current situation toward the future. Next, please. Which can be, this change can be captured along 3 points. So instead of a territory centered in Geneva, we are moving toward the polycentric territory. Instead of 2 Genevas, we are creating a 1 binational metropolis. Instead of a sprawl and a kind of a chaotic urban form, we are moving hopefully toward a more legible and recognizable figure. Next, please. With the global local territories, this is a specific rubric which addresses the special forms of land use related to international protagonists and global protagonists that are very much present in Geneva. That also operate along a special governance arrangement, sometimes on a kind of a conditions of extraterritoriality. We believe that sometimes they are detrimental, and thus we create this recognition of territories under influence of such protagonists that should, we believe, be engaged as agents of urban transformation at local level, and promote territorial equity and spatial justice through cross-border cooperation. So for instance, this would lead, their active involvement and willingness to engage would lead to a more equitable distribution of housing and working spaces. Next, please. Again, indicators, next, please. Once again, the scenario of change. Next, please. With post-fossil infrastructures, we recognize territories where we have the opportunity to regenerate terrains and networks that of former fossil infrastructures that can in the future be reclaimed as new corridors for fresh air, passage for nature, wildlife, urban life, public space, and so on. Next, please. Next, please. Agri-landscape rooms. This is very important and a kind of a complementary figure with our binational metropolis. We believe that such landscapes of regional metropolitan agriculture could be created within the urban fabric. They would feed the metropolis, provide space for leisure and recreation, protect water sources, support biodiversity, and would themselves be protected from encroachment and construction. So instead of, let's say, idea of agricultural lands being somehow outside of the city and that city countryside dichotomy, we are creating a figure where agriculture, to say so, arrives in the middle of the metropolis. Next, please. Cartographic indicators and the kind of a suggestion of the possible figure. Next, please. Metropolitan countryside. I have to hurry up. Describes potentials and needs for moving. So these are specific countryside areas that are caught within the metropolitan figure, where we recognize that we need to move from specific areas that are currently in the kind of a function or status of exclusive and frozen landscape of leisure and elite uses, and that we need to develop them as inclusive and diverse cultural landscapes in the metropolitan region. So we are talking about cultural landscapes, the village areas, countrysides that are somehow captured within that regional figure. Next, please. Next, please. Vital streams and canopies, we have already mentioned that there is a need to move from the fragmented nature areas in the present toward integrated and refined ecological networks that link higher and lower altitudes, mountains and the lake, as illustrated in this image. Next, please. Next, please. And finally, we believe that mountain parks are important both for the identity of Geneva and for let's say, regional governance, ecological governance. And here we want to move from the singular kind of patchwork of nature reserves and protected areas toward a very powerful and continuous ecological frame of the metropolis. Next, please. Next, please. And next. So what is important to, in conclusion of the Charta, is to say that at the intersection between urban strategies and the territories of potentials, next, please, we are arriving at a kind of a matrix or a possible reading where we can apply every one of our urban strategies in every one of our territories. And next, please. What we are getting is a kind of a let's say, a script for constructing agendas, for writing policies, where it is let's say an evolving project, and would be a kind of a true and exciting challenge, I think, for the participants in the Greater Geneva to engage with this task. So. Thank you. Let's go on, Florian.
Okay, so we would be grateful if you give us 3 minutes now to finish our presentation. Can we go to the next one, please? More? Do you want to say a word on this one, Milica? Before I start,
I can just say that this is an image, I believe, of let's say a regional planning project where we have a chance to achieve a kind of a stable and legible figure. So going beyond the city and embracing regions as a scales of planning and design.
Next, please. Yes, so we have developed 30 design case studies. I will not develop them now, but just give me 3 minutes or 2 minutes to develop one. Next, please. So this is I think one of our biggest challenge is the renaturalization of sealed surfaces, which in Switzerland have increased by 30% over the last 25 years. And we have the opportunity here to reuse numerous areas of the fossil age, roads, car parks, petrol stations, storage areas, and so on. We can either dismantle and naturalize them, or we can use them as foundations for the construction of housing and other uses. Next, please. So let's look at the infrastructure system of Greater Geneva. You see, I mean, everything is concentrated towards the city center, and it has mentioned this morning, the Le Mans Express is only the beginning of an idea that sustainable infrastructures should be thought of as transnational. So if we consider Greater Geneva as a coherent urban landscape, then infrastructures within should also be urban. So highways could be converted and partially naturalized. Next, please. So here we can see, let's take the example of the A41 in France and the A1 in Switzerland, which cuts through the territory of Greater Geneva from Saint-Julien to Chavannes. Next, please. And the transformation of this motorway could reunite the landscape, make possible topologies of biodiversity, at the same time accommodate a new tramway and take in urban boulevards with some new dense and mixed centers, garden cities of the 21st century. Next, please. So this is maybe one example. You can see here the highway junction in Perly. Next, please. And so this is how it is today. Next, please. And this is how we could build on it. About 1,500 new housing units, plus smaller commerce, offices, and other amenities, all lined with urban farming of 12,500 square meters and continuous woods with 1,450 new trees. Next, please. Without sealing almost no areas, a new district could be created here, which is of course interlinked with the environment, the urban district Perli, and the new tram. At the same time, I mean, here we are less than 3 kilometers away from the city center, a distance that can easily be crossed by a bicycle. Next, and this is how we imagine the transition of this urban district to the landscape, with cooperatives and medium-sized buildings groups on the right. In the ground floor, there are community rooms, shops, and co-working spaces. There are generous community outdoor areas docking onto playgrounds and sports facilities, next to which community gardens develop in turn. The whole is bordered by a city forest. Next, please. So we have developed other projects, for example, the Crécy Motor Junction and the oil silos next, the airport, an incredible area today of the fossil age. And we are only 2.5 kilometers from Cornavin Central Station. So we could transform these sites of the fossil area into garden cities of Bardonnay and Crécy. And for example, students who worked on a learning center for the ecological transition. Next, please. And we are almost there.
Yes, please, you can play this as a movie. This is a collection of illustrations of student work. As we mentioned, there were over 30 design case studies done by the students during the years in the frame of the region, and we can use this also as a background to start our discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
I think there's one still, a last one.
I will ask to move to, yeah.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Merci. Thank you, Milica. Thank you, Florian, for this very intensive and extensive work on the large scale up to the small scale. Merci pour ce travail qui a traversé les échelles. Donc, je vais passer la parole, disons plutôt, donner la possibilité au collège d'experts et au comité de pilotage de poser des questions. On vous avait pris plus de temps. Vous avez pris 40 minutes. Donc, you took 40 minutes instead of 30. So, we will cut in half the question time so that we can continue with that, losing lots of time into the next team. So, who is willing, qui veut poser des questions, qui a des remarques à faire parmi les membres du comité, du collège d'experts ou du comité de pilotage? Est-ce qu'il y a des réactions? Et Michel sur le pupitre. Merci. It's working, yeah, it should be working.
So I'll try to ask in English. I'm interested to ask you about the way you passed from the 8 or 5, I don't remember the scenarios, to the charter, I'm confusing the languages, sorry. The different axes you choose. Could you explain just why you choose these ones? How were they more important than other ones? There are some, well, I can understand perfectly the post-fossil infrastructures, but others are perhaps not so evident. That would be interesting from a methodological point of view and, comment on dit contenu?
Content.
Content, thank you. I had the German name. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your question. So if I'm understanding correctly, because the sound was not very good, but let's say I believe that in the report and through student work, we have tried to tackle, I think, each of those territories of potentials in a equal way through those design investigations with students and the research that we carried out. So, for example, we have let's say, done projects in the what we call the metropolitan countryside of Jussy. So it's a kind of profoundly frozen countryside of Geneva, which is at the same time impacted by the laws of Surface de Solomon and the laws. So let's say land is frozen in its shape, and architecture of villages is protected as well. I mean, this has led to a number of social phenomena. First of all, elite living, let's say, loss of younger population, closing down of schools, and so on and so forth. So, for instance, the subject in such condition would be how to allow for a more open and diverse scenarios, even in the cases where we have clearly areas of a high heritage and cultural priority, right? So let's say, how can we involve a lower cost housing? How can we diversify the populations? How can we ensure that there is locally owned land that allows for such activities to be developed and so forth. So I could go on and on, let's say, across the different territories, you know, through the case studies. I think we have somehow tried to elaborate this link between the larger scales and the concrete possible projects. And I would emphasize that there is not let's say, one single project, that it's literally almost a kind of inexhaustible, I think, a number of opportunities that open themselves as we begin to work with these concepts and link them with the territory. I hope I have tackled it.
Thank you, Milica. I hope we had some response here, but we can go back again later. Any other question, Emmanuel, that I can see you on screen?
No, it's very quickly, because I think that we don't have a lot of time, and just a comment. When I analyze all the projects, to be sincere, I like a lot your approach. I think it's very clear. It's more or less the institutional personality who talked before talks about this mesh situation between city and landscapes, and is more complex, because it's a mesh situation between city, landscapes, infrastructures, and probably virtual connections. No, but it's true that at the beginning it seems that you enter with a schema very previsible, no, with different rings, but at the end you are mixing these rings in a kind of mosaic of different landscapes, as you say, and different cities and different situations, where this mesh is not a modern articulation, very clear, but more a kind of differential geometry. And it's not easy to do. It's do with a lot of rigor. I like a lot your approach. And just to say something that, because I am an expert, to say, hey, perhaps it would be good, is that it's very good also the operations that are linking the different approaches to show that it's possible not to do different prototypes, etc. I think it's very good. Perhaps some reflection about the capacity of the new technologies, not the new technologies online, etc., that is, we know the network data, but the capacity of the citizens to have new apps, new applications that are more and more, how to explain, changing co-producing, co-generating our spaces, and our reflection about ourselves as architects, planners, etc., could be interesting. But this is not only for you; it's in general. It's also for me. We have this problem today: how to integrate this new situation, absolutely contemporary. For the rest, I think that is one of the projects probably more close to my kind of approach, and perhaps some also to finish some more epical visions. The personality to those we got before say is very dangerous. The visions is true. The architects, we have this danger. The visions, but we work with the space, and the end, the geographers or the other people do reports with numbers, and at the end, this seems very serious. But I think that we need also big visions or some visions. I think your proto-master plan, or that is not a master plan, it's more a line-wide, a diagram, a kind of proto-master plan is fantastic. To be sincere, for me, it's fantastic. But some more epical visions could be big. I think, but I don't have the opportunity to see all your projects because there's a problem technique here. And perhaps in the last document you did, because I had the impression that it was there, no? This more or less this more holistic situation. It's true also that we are in a moment where we need also dynamic maps to show the different simulations that are wide, that are with a strategy, as you say. You have done a strategy, but with different capacities of evolution. But well, for me, congratulations. It's a fantastic work.
Okay. Sorry, Florian, since there's no question, I think it's better to end up here because we're going to slide through the whole day. Let's keep questions and possibilities of remarks at the end because you'll be we'll be at the round table. So what we can keep here in mind is that we're having a charter, like 10 principles and 7, right? Is it 7 territories that create a sort of a matrix, as you say, 10 cités, and 5 times 7, which creates a matrix, so 5 principles, cities of principles, and 7 situations, 7 areas, aerial types that you're working on. Donc on a cette matrice d'un 5 par 7 qui crée une situation de heuristique, si vous voulez, qui pourrait, c'est une espèce de moteur de solution qui pourrait s'organiser pour être utilisé pour trouver des projets ou définir des projets. On peut maintenir cette idée qu'on pourra discuter à la fin, mais aussi la demande la proposition d'Emmanuel de dynamic mapping. C'est quelque chose qui pourrait faire avancer votre idée de manière plus évidente dans le futur. C'est-à-dire que la carte que vous montrez générale pourrait être déjà une carte dynamique et avec de nouvelles peut-être manières de représentation qu'on pourrait utiliser dans le futur. Tout ça, c'est des questions ouvertes. Je propose qu'on reste ici avec ce projet, parce que sinon, on sait qu'on va de toute façon glisser dans le temps. Et merci beaucoup, encore une fois, à l'équipe zuricho-luxembourgeoise. Restez avec nous pour la suite des événements. Et je propose maintenant à l'équipe intitulée « La grande traversée, la recherche des écologies singulières », menée par Franck Huillard d'Interland. Merci encore.